just to start off with all of you, this is the most movie to ever movie. Hello interwebs, I hope you're all doing well, and I am here to talk about a movie that I am honestly just in complete and utter awe of, and that is Everything Everywhere All at Once, a movie that just released in theaters a few days ago, an A24 film which is known for its very weird and off-the-wall movies, which this is definitely one of them, but also starring Michelle Yeoh, who many of you in my audience may know from Star Trek Discovery, as well as numerous other things. She is an absolute legend of an actor, but of course I'm going to bring up Star Trek Discovery. And then also directed by the directors of the movie Swiss Army Man, yes, the farting Daniel Radcliffe movie from a few years ago, which was itself a really wonderful and amazing film, despite it being full of just fart jokes. It was one of the most inventive films I've ever seen. But the directors Daniel Kwan and Daniel, I believe I'm going to say his name wrong, Schnart. Apologies if I mispronounced it, but they collectively call themselves the Daniels. And like I said, I am in complete and utter awe of this film. When I saw their last movie, Swiss Army Man, I knew that these directors were inventive and liked to do new and creative and weird things with cinema. And I really liked that movie, but I did not expect their next film out of the gate to be, I think, one of the most ambitious, over-the-top, bonkers, like, just out there, wild, most fun, and yet ultimately most touching movies that I have ever seen in my life. I do not mean to oversell this film, but it's hard to oversell it, because I don't think I have ever, in a movie theater, laughed and cried and been just absolutely just overwhelmed with feeling of just my humanity and the fullness of my humanity in any other movie ever before. Again, I know that sounds like a lot, but I honestly had kind of an experience watching this film. And I think I should probably talk about what this film actually is, but it's going to be very difficult because the less you kind of know about the movie, the better, but it's really hard to spoil much of anything without just experiencing the film. But the basic concept of the movie is we follow Michelle Yeoh's character, who is a laundromat owner with a husband who she's sort of distanced from and maybe looking to divorce her in the near future, and then a daughter who is gay and who she kind of accepts but is still also distanced from. And so she's a hardworking mother and wife, but doesn't really know when to connect with anybody around her and doesn't really slow down enough to understand the world around her because she's just constantly moving, constantly working. And one day, she gets drawn into a strange, weird, and wacky adventure involving multiverses. And she gets sent into many different multiverses, and I don't want to say much more than that because otherwise it gets into spoilers, but when I say multiverses, I mean this movie takes advantage of every concept that you've ever thought about when it comes to multiverses. Like, multiverses are in vogue right now with all the comic book superhero movies doing them and things like that. They have not touched even a fraction of what this movie does with multiverse. I have never seen a movie do more with a multiverse concept than this. And that comes down to just the mechanics of how this multiverse works. Again, I don't want to spoil too much, but just the ways that characters are able to jump between universes and how they access their experiences in other universes is one of the most bonkers and hilarious and yet weirdly has a sense of logic to it that I have ever seen in a film, and it leads to some of the most hilarious sequences you have ever seen in my life. There is one fight sequence in this movie involving an award statue that might be the funniest fight sequence I've ever seen in my life. Like, Michelle Yeoh is a powerhouse, is definitely a physical action actor, and she gets to show it off here, not only just in some amazing choreographed scenes, but in some hilarious physical comedy as well. But all of that is in service of a story that I think just cuts at what it means to be human. The philosophy in this film, expressed in very weird ways, and believe me, you're going to want a bagel after you watch this movie. You'll know what I mean once you see the film. But the way that this film deals with theories of, like, philosophy and finding meaning in life, manages to make things of this, like, existential dread of being alive feel, I don't know, it just hits you hard. And it deals with things that I think philosophy and humanity just in general has been struggling with since our birth, really, of, like, what is the meaning of life? What is the purpose of life? Is there any purpose to humanity? And the ways that this movie explores that are devastating and feel over the like grand, and manages to feel grand and overuse and touch upon like the experience of humanity, and yet makes it feel very human too, like just about connecting with personal experiences and connections between us, about how ultimately meaning in life is about finding connection, about being kind, and the way it showcases that visually, the like how kindness is expressed visually is like kindness versus violence. In one final fight sequence, the way that kindness is showed as Michelle Yeoh just ascends the staircase is just so moving. I was laughing and crying. I mean, this movie makes freaking hot dog fingers, again, you'll know what I mean when you see the movie, be one of the most touching things I have seen ever. And it's ridiculous. And yet, it cuts at your soul. On top of that, despite the fact that this movie is over 2.5 hours long, it never stops being visually creative and inventive. Like right up until the end of the movie, this thing is constantly showing you new visuals, new ideas, new concepts, and yet it always still builds up to what the larger message and theme of the movie is, and always stays true to the heart of the film. And yet what grounds this movie the most, despite its crazy, wacky, out there visuals and ideas and concepts, is the acting. I have already spoken about Michelle Yeoh, who is absolutely fantastic throughout the film, but also Jamie Lee Curtis appears in this movie and is also absolutely hysterical and wonderful and heartbreaking at the same time. But even more specifically, Ki Hyun Kwan, who plays Michelle Yeoh's husband, and Stephanie Hsu, who plays her daughter, and apologies if I mispronounced their names, are fantastic in this. I mean, all four of these actors just bring so much heart to every scene that you just feel so grounded and feel so brought into the humanity of this entire film, despite the insanity, the pure insanity of everything going on around you. It is truly a masterclass in filmmaking and acting and visuals and just everything to do with this medium. I honestly don't feel like I am up to the task of expressing in this off-the-cuff, unscripted way what this film means to me. As someone who is a workaholic, as someone who does struggle with finding meaning in the world, in myself, and worrying that I'm not good enough, this movie just made me weep coming out of it. And yet it made me laugh so hard at the same time. If you have not experienced this movie, you need to. It is definitely in one of my top 100 movies of all time. It very might be in my top 10 movies of all time. And I'm only reason I'm saying it's not definitively is because I just recently saw this movie a few days ago, but I'm almost certain it will be a top 10 movie of all time for me. Like, this movie is just everything that inspires me about art, about filmmaking, about science fiction, and about being alive. I know that feels like I'm overselling it. It will not. Let me tell you one last anecdote to wrap out this review on. I went and saw this with a friend. And normally we like talk a whole bunch and chat after films. We both walked out of this movie. We could barely speak. But as we were leaving the theater, we ran into the ticket taker who we had spoken to on our way in. She was very friendly. And she said to us, many people have left this movie. I haven't seen it yet. They come back the next few days, over the next couple of days to see it again. And I'm just so curious. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense to me. This is a movie, I'm almost certainly going to go and rewatch this movie in theaters again. The only reason I haven't is I've been busy. Otherwise, I already would have. This is a movie you will want to see several times because I think it will hit you just as powerfully every time you watch it. So, like I said, I don't want to set your expectations too high, but again, I don't think I really can set your expectations too high for this film. It is a 10 out of 10 for me. I don't give ratings to films, but if I do, 10 out of 10. Fantastic movie. Go watch Everything Everywhere All at Once. It is absolutely wonderful. One of the best experiences that you'll have in the theater. This movie just inspires me on every level. So yeah, that's where I'll leave it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoy it. Please, if you have seen this movie, please talk to me about it. Let me know in the comments. I need to talk to somebody about this. This movie just hit me so much, and I want to talk to you about it. So please let me know in the comments. But beyond all of that, thank you so much, everyone. And as always, live long and prosper.